And we stay in the US for this next story because Nazis were given more rights to contest their removal from the US during World War II than Venezuelan migrants deported by the Trump administration. Now, that's the view of a US appeals court judge, as the Trump administration has invoked a state secrets privilege and refused to give any additional information about the deportation of Venezuelan migrants to El Salvador under an 18th century maritime wartime law. Now, it's a case that has become a real flashpoint amid escalating tension between the administration and the federal courts. We're going to talk about it now with Ketavan Gordestani, our international affairs editor, who joins me here on set. Ketavan, tell us then, first of all, about this latest legal battle over the Trump administration's deportations of Venezuelan migrants.
Well, look, what the Trump administration is trying to do is to challenge the freezing by a lower court judge of future deportations of Venezuelan migrants under that act, that Wartime Act from 1798, not the previous ones, the ones who have already been deported. Now, the Alien Enemies Act, that law allows the president during wartime, which is important to state, to detain and deport citizens of an enemy nation, typically a nation that the U.S. is at war with. The Trump administration has considered that Venezuelans, those that they are trying to deport under that act, that they belong to the Tren de Aragua Venezuelan gang, and that gang has been determined to be a terrorist organization by the Trump administration. The law has only been invoked 3 times by the United States over the history of the country: the War of 1812, World War I, and the last time, World War II, where they used it to deport, for example, Germans, Japanese, or Italian citizens, because those countries were the countries that the U.S. was at war with. What the Trump administration is saying is that a judge cannot second-guess, basically, a president's decisions, especially when it comes to national security and foreign policy. What the lawyers defending those migrants are saying is that the use of the Alien Enemies Act, without giving those migrants the right or the possibility of challenging and saying, I am not a member of that gang, that is pure violation of their due process rights. And that is where the judge that you mentioned said this, used this analogy with how the Nazis were treated during World War II. The problem here is that, of course, it's a lower court's game, and this is all eventually, no matter what the decision is in the U.S. Courts of Appeal, this is going to go to the Supreme Court that will have to determine whether or not the president is right and allowed to use this law to deport those Venezuelan migrants.
Let's broaden it out a little bit. Of course, lots of ways that Donald Trump's trying to break the norms. How are the courts reacting more generally to that?
Well, look, it seems that when it comes to checks and balances in the United States, there is one branch of government that is standing up when the other one, Congress, which is dominated by Republicans that are not showing any willingness to go against Donald Trump, it is the judicial branch that so far is presenting the biggest challenge for Donald Trump. The federal courts have basically become the battleground for Trump's agenda. And you've seen some types of blocks happening over the past 2 months. You saw the order to force the rehiring of those federal workers that were fired by Elon Musk, by Doge. There's a block right now on the ban on trans people serving in the military. There's also a block right now on trying to change the rules of birthright citizenship in the United States. There's also a block on dismantling some federal agencies like USAID or others. You have about 130 lawsuits against Donald Trump's executive actions, executive orders, and among those there are at least 40 injunctions freezing or blocking some of those attempts. A lot of them have to do with immigration. The other big block is anything that has to do with the sort of firing of federal workers and what Doge is trying to do. And a few of them have to do with the rights of trans people. Right now, the Supreme Court hasn't really had to delve into the merits of the cases. They've rejected some emergency calls. But in the end, at some point on several of these elements, it is the Supreme Court that will have to make the ultimate decision.
So as far as the Trump administration is concerned, if the courts could potentially be a problem, are they trying to get around that, and could the courts try and stop them still?
Well, look, Donald Trump has lashed out at the courts, at judges. This is nothing new. He did it during his first term. He did it while he was out of office, and he's doing it again. But he and his administration have really stepped up the attacks, the personal attacks on judges, attacks on lawyers themselves, and really, in this case, the judge that ordered the freezing of those deportations, Donald Trump and his allies like J.D. Vance, like Elon Musk, have really gone after that judge himself, calling for his impeachment because he was sort of going against the president. This prompted a very rare and public response by the Chief Justice of the U.S. Supreme Court, John Roberts, who basically said that appeals, not impeachment, is the proper response when you disagree with a judicial decision. But there are concerns because Donald Trump has hinted at the fact that he's not really wanting to play along with the judicial branch. He, of course, famously used a quote attributed to the French Emperor Napoleon, saying, "He who saved this country does not violate any laws," meaning if he feels he's right in the laws that he's trying to push forward, who are the judges to tell him otherwise? Courts have so far shown that they're willing to disagree, that they're willing to go against him, but there are now concerns about what happens in the end. Let's say some of these cases that I've talked about go all the way to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court rules against Donald Trump, and he says, well, I don't care, I'm not going to go ahead with it. The problem is he controls now basically Congress. He controls the Department of Justice, the FBI, all law enforcement. So how do you implement it? And I'll finish with this quote by the 7th President of the United States, Andrew Jackson, who said that the Supreme Court has made its decision. Now let them enforce it. The problem is they probably can't. That would be a constitutional crisis for the United States.